But what if I told you that there is a new supersonic plane coming soon? This is where Tesla's supersonic vertical takeoff and landing jet comes into play, a machine that Elon Musk has been dreaming of building for years now.
At some point, I have a design in mind for an electric supersonic vertical takeoff and landing plane.
And I think there's a particular opportunity for a supersonic vertical takeoff and landing electric jet. Supersonic electric jet. Vertical takeoff and landing electric jet. A supersonic electric vertical takeoff and landing jet. An electric jet.
And of course, all of this is going to be fueled by Elon Musk's devastating knowledge of batteries, because of course, everyone knows that Tesla batteries are so much better than the competition, right?
However, Tesla has been preparing to release a battery that has far more density than previous lithium-ion batteries.
Yeah, I think he's talking about this amazing evolution of the Elon Musk batteries where they store 50% more energy. Look at that incredible evolution from 2008 to 2017. This is almost a decade of progress for Elon Musk. Or except, you know that 1865 there? That's actually the dimensions of the battery. So it's 18 millimeters diameter, 65 millimeters in length. So let's calculate the volume of that battery, shall we? And it's about 17 milliliters, that sort of thing. So what's the other battery? It's a 21 millimeters in diameter, 2.1 centimeters in diameter by 7 centimeters in length. And it's about 24 milliliters, that sort of thing. So 10 years of progress for Elon Musk is he's made a battery that is 50% bigger, that has 50% more energy. In other words, the energy density really hasn't changed at all in about 10 years. 10 years of progress was making a battery that was slightly bigger. But what's that? There's been a new battery day this year with a new incredible battery that has 5 times the energy, 6 times the power, and what does it say, 16% more range. And the one thing you'll notice that it doesn't say there is the energy density of the battery, because basically the battery is 5 times bigger. So yeah, it can deliver 5 times the power and contains about 5 times the energy.
In terms of miles per hour, Rolls-Royce has been looking to make an electric plane that could fly up to 300 miles per hour, but Tesla could easily outcompete that by a substantial amount with far superior battery technology and designing.
Yes, that's unless Rolls-Royce engineers managed to figure out Elon Musk's incredibly clever secret that making things bigger means that they contain more stuff. So how many seconds do you think it's going to take the supersonic vertical takeoff and landing electric jet to crash and burn? Let's get a timer going, shall we, Elon?
A compelling aircraft, you only really need about 400 watt-hours per kilogram.
Okay, he's talking about battery energy densities there that are already about twice what we can currently make, and is probably beyond what we will ever be able to make. I'll come back to that later, but I didn't want to interrupt him too much. So great, we're going to give you your 400 watt-hour per kilogram batteries. What you got for us now?
Provided the percentage of cell on the craft, on the aircraft is high. It doesn't need to be anywhere near as high as it is on a rocket. But if it's sort of at the 70% level at 400 watt-hours per kilogram.
Really? Your plane is going to be 70% by weight battery. It's not so much a plane as it is a battery with wings. You know, that means that you've got 30% of the weight left to actually make everything else that you need for the planes. You know, the wings, the motors, people who are going to fly in it, you know, the cargo, the whole point the plane exists. I mean, let's just compare this to some other planes. Right, so we're going to take a look at the A320 as one of the most popular aircraft in the world. It's a sort of benchmark to give us a feel of how much of the actual plane's takeoff weight is typically the fuel. So if we come down to the statistics, here we go. We're taking a look at the A320. That's this boy over here. The maximum takeoff weight is about 80 tons. Maximum payload is about 20 tons. And the fuel capacity is also about 20 tons. So on a decent sized flight on one of these things, you burn each one of the passengers burns their own body weight in jet fuel. Good. So here is the total takeoff weight of our A320, which is about 80 tons. And we know the total mass of fuel on board, the energy supply for the aircraft, is about 25% of that takeoff weight. Well, for Elon Musk's vertical takeoff and landing supersonic electric jet, we don't really know anything, except the mass of the energy source alone. The battery is going to be at least 70% of the aircraft. That means it's going to be rather cramped to get both the weight of the aircraft, which for our A320 there is about half of the total takeoff weight, and of course the cargo, the people who are going to fly in it, which for the A320 is about 200 people, or equal to about 20 tons of cargo.
You can do very decent range. And if you sort of move it up to the sort of mid to high 70s, you can go transcontinental. But with, not intercontinental, but sort of west coast to east coast.
Which is one of the reasons why I chose the A320 here, because that's about its range as well. Obviously, if you reduce the number of passengers or cargo and increase the fuel load, it'll go a lot further. But with this typical loadout, its range is about across the United States, that sort of thing. However, for Elon Musk to do it, he needs the percent battery to be, what do you say, high 70s. So let's bump it up to high 70s. At which point, this isn't a plane. It's a battery with wings.
In this video, I'm gonna go over how Tesla will soon disrupt the airline industry as you know it. Welcome to Kazgain's Academy.
Now, people like Elon Musk here will be quick to point out that electric motors have better power-to-weight ratios than non-electric motors.
And then electric motors have a higher power-to-weight ratio than a combustion engine, so you could actually have the power to do the vertical takeoff and landing part with a fairly small motor.
So if the engines on this thing were really heavy like they were in cars, then there would be some significant advantage to actually using an electric motor here. So let's take a look at the engines of the Airbus here. What fraction of the total weight of the plane are they? And boom, there they are at about 2.5 tons apiece, that sort of thing. So two of them, 4-5 tons, that sort of thing, out of an airframe weight of about 40 tons. Even if the electric motors weighed nothing, it still wouldn't be a great weight saving for the plane. Alternatively, sticking with the A320 comparison, we know here that the weight of the aircraft is about 40 tons, and the weight of the passengers and the cargo is about 20 tons, and for the gas version of this, the fuel is about 20 tons. But with Elon Musk's plane, we know that the weight of the aircraft and the passengers is only going to be about 30% of the total takeoff weight of the vehicle, which means we're going to need about 120 tons of batteries for this plane. But it doesn't quite stop there. If you take a look at the top one, you'll notice that the weight of the aircraft, the structure that you need to carry everything else, which is the cargo and the fuel, they're about the same. So if you want to carry 20 tons of passengers and 20 tons of fuel, you need a 40-ton plane. But now if you take a look at the bottom one, we've got 120 tons of battery and 20 tons of people, but only a 40-ton plane. So at that point, the plane needs to be about another 100 tons heavier just to structurally carry all of this. But wait, now the aircraft weight plus the weight of the passengers and the cargo is 160 tons. So for this plane to be 2/3 cell as Elon Musk wants it, we now need 320 tons of batteries. And so this just goes on. It's a non-convergent series. This just isn't going to happen. And this is before we get on to the real killer. For Elon Musk's flying battery to work here, he needed an energy density of 400 watt-hours per kilo. Currently, the best is about 250. Now, you might say, well, that's great. It's almost only a factor of 2. It's got to get better. Well, some things you can make better easily. Some things you really can't. So, for instance, car engines are typically only about 30% efficient. So, I mean, if we could just make the engines like 80% efficient, then we could halve our gas usage in cars overnight. Why has no one done it yet? And the answer is because it's not that easy. You know, some of these things reach a sort of fairly natural thermodynamic limit. With the petrol car engine, it's about 30%. With diesels, it's a bit higher because you can get a higher compression ratio on it. And the same is true for jet engines because, again, you get a higher compression ratio. I mean, you might remember that about 3 years ago now, there were these claims that someone was going to get 3 times the energy density out of a battery.
Nearly 40 years after he helped create a battery that would change the world, Goodenough and researchers at the University of Texas at Austin have announced they've invented a new battery that sounds too good to be true. And the new battery they've come up with is unlike anything anyone's ever seen before. Compared to current batteries, it can hold 3 to 10 times the charge, can be recharged in minutes instead of hours, and has a lifespan of over 1,000 cycles, and doesn't go boom in your back pocket.
Now, this was a little different than most of your busting videos, in that the guy who claimed that it invented this was first of all a Nobel Prize winner and was central to the development of the lithium-ion battery. But that doesn't mean he can perform miracles, for reasons that I will explain shortly. But just so we get a little closure on this, I'm sure that this battery that contains 3 to 10 times the energy and is a complete miracle has taken the world by storm. Right? Actually, no. Not really a peep has come out of it in the 3 years since I busted it.
Right, so why is it exceptionally unlikely that Elon Musk is going to be able to double the energy density of his batteries? And just so we're clear, this is what lithium-ion cells look like, or some of them do. This one's been partially taken apart. These are the individual cells. And even when you short circuit these, they are pretty bloody impressive. In fact, I might short circuit one of these just so you can see how much energy is actually stored in these. And the idea of doubling the amount of energy stored in these things is actually pretty frightening when you see what a failing battery can actually look like.
This can lead to significant safety concerns such as formation of fires, etc.
What we're doing here, of course, is we're all storing energy. So we're going to start off with the apex of energy storage, which is hydrocarbons. It doesn't really matter whether you're talking methane, which is what Elon Musk uses to fire up his rockets. That's hexane, but octane's fairly similar to what your car runs on. Or this one here, which that's butane. And you mix it up with air, and it generates a lot of heat. In fact, you know, in terms of energy density, it turns out all of these hydrocarbons basically have the same energy density, which includes body fat. Body fat, turns out, has crazy energy density, which is why evolution said that's a good way to carry your energy around. And the way that this works is fairly simple, that you start off with weakish bonds and you end up with strong chemical bonds. And that change is what releases all the energy. So I'm going to take a nice little example here, and I'm going to choose a real simple one. So we're going to take fluorine or chlorine, doesn't really matter what. Nice diatomic molecule like that. Boom. And we're going to burn hydrogen. Nice diatomic molecule like that. And, you know, when these two burn, you will get a nice little flame like that. And what you get at the end is, and this is why I chose it, because it's graphically very simple to see what's going on here. So you start off with 2 chlorines, or 2 fluorines, 2 hydrogens. You end up with 2 chlorines and 2 hydrogens. But when you start off, you have relatively weak bonds here, and when you end up, you have really strong bonds here, and that releases all of the energy that makes stuff hot. Now, I'm going to say these are weak chemical bonds that have essentially no real energy in them, and you end up with a strong chemical bond at the end. So the amount of stuff that you need to store one strong chemical bond's worth of energy is 2 atoms. And that's basically as good as it gets. Now let's compare that to what happens in a battery. So here we have our battery, and with a battery you have an electron. That's an electron. The electron actually sits in there somewhere, and this would be discharged. So let's start off with a charged battery, which means that this guy's all the way over here and the electrons are over there. So this is the critical bit, is the difference between these two chemical states here, between basically your ion being over there or your ion being over there, is about a chemical bond's worth of energy. And this is the fundamental bit, right? So you take a look at what you need to store one chemical bond's worth of energy. And with a battery, you need like 20 atoms. Or if you're just burning stuff, you need a couple of atoms to store one strong chemical bond's worth of energy. And yeah, this is why, I mean, even as it stands, current lithium-ion batteries are really very good. There's not much space in them for anything else. So what a battery would look like is there'll be a whole array of the sort of discharge states over here, a whole array of the charge states over here, and yeah, there'll be metal plates on the outside. Those metal plates will be connected to, you know, those connectors. And when you connect that, the electron says, well, I really want to be over here. This guy says, I really want to be over here in sort of discharge state. And your electron zips around the outside and he ends up there. And that, you know, runs your phone or whatever. But there's a problem, right? With batteries, all you need to do is for those two metal plates to touch each other, and all of a sudden you give a very quick way of the electrons from going from there to there, and that releases all of the energy of the battery into the battery. Right? It's essentially doing this, but all of the energy, it doesn't get a chance to do any work on the way, so all of that energy ends up in the battery, and that's why short-circuiting batteries can be fairly frightening, to the point where if you double the energy density of these things, I mean, even as they stand, these things are truly frightening, to the point where it's amazing that they're as reliable as they are. But there comes a point when, you know, you're packing more and more energy into something, it's basically going to become a bomb. And as it stands, the energy density of your lithium-ion batteries is about a quarter of that of TNT. And TNT is about the same energy density as thermite. So I got some video of thermite somewhere.
As TNT. And when that releases all of its energy, when it reacts, its temperature goes up over 2,000 degrees. Once it's going, there isn't a chance in hell of stopping it. Right, so you set thermite off, the temperature goes up to about 3,000 degrees. So for Elon Musk's battery, if it gets a short circuit in it, the temperature goes up to about 1,500 degrees Celsius, which is enough to basically melt absolutely everything. So this is the problem, is the more energy you store into the battery, the more the battery basically becomes a bomb, or at best thermite, to the point where, you know, all it would take is one short circuit in any of the batteries on the plane, and the cascade failure means that Elon Musk's flying battery becomes a molten flying battery. So that's the fundamental problem. You want to store electrical energy in a battery, you need the two states, and those are just physically bulkier and heavier than other chemical ways of storing the energy. And even at that, when these batteries fail, they can be spectacular, packing twice as much energy into them just for a minimalistic thing where 70% of your plane needs to be battery. This is tricky, especially when you understand that the energy density of Elon Musk's revolutionary new batteries really hasn't shifted any in about 10 years.
I'm a con man, or maybe I'm a god, zooming round the planet in my highfalutin pun.
And you get these things like Ragone plots, where you get them from respectable sources, and they've got lithium batteries pegged out at pretty much as high as they're going to go at the moment. Now, sure, if you look around, you'll find other plots like this from Maxwell, who was acquired by Tesla in 2020. Yes, apparently they're daydreaming about 3 times the energy density on batteries in just a few years. Now, where have I heard that before?
Compared to current batteries, it can hold 3 to 10 times the charge, can be recharged in minutes instead of hours.
Ah, yes, the disruptive zone. Of course, the disruptive zone. If only we could make petrol engines 2 times as efficient, we would be in the disruptive zone as well. The world promises of crazy watt-hour per kilo batteries aren't by any means limited to Elon Musk. I mean, this is an article I found from 2015. Bosch claims they're going to have 400 watt-hour per kilo solid-state batteries for half the price of today's batteries by 2020. Yeah, odd how that works. Seems these super high energy density batteries are always 3 to 5 years away. Now, there'll be people out there who are saying, well, hang on, look, let's just assume that the battery-powered planes are about as efficient as the gas-powered planes. Yeah, just for a rough measure. That means that you've got about as much energy on the gas-powered planes as you will on the electric-powered planes. So, if you've got the same amount of energy on board, then surely the hydrocarbon fuel on board these planes must be really dangerous too. Well, the fuel is only dangerous when it's mixed with oxygen. You keep it away from the oxygen and it's perfectly safe. Butane. Hell, the only time I know where the burning fuel leaking from the fuel tank was a problem was in the Concorde crash, where the Concorde didn't actually have self-sealing fuel tanks, which are basically standard on planes. But even at that, the fire was only a big contributor to the crash. It was the loss of power on their engines at takeoff, which meant that they had a very difficult to control aircraft that was critically losing speed. Yeah, I mean, the plane just really wasn't flyable with 2 engines out of 4 not working and the undercarriage stuck down. Now, it turns out that the fuel was actually melting one of their control surfaces, but it was the loss of airspeed that caused the crash. Hell, you only have to take a look at the size of the fireballs in plane crashes to realize the amount of energy that's stored in that fuel. But this is the critical difference. If you power a plane by a battery, every battery failure will lead to a plane crash. Because once a battery with this energy density starts to fail, there's really nothing that can be done to stop it. Well, not on a plane that's 70% battery, anyway.
To have a compelling aircraft, you only really need about 400 watt-hours per kilogram, provided the percentage of cell on the aircraft is high. It doesn't need to be anywhere near as high as it is on a rocket, but if it's sort of at the 70% level at 400 watt-hours per kilogram, you can do very decent range.
Elon Musk himself has stated that 400 watt-hours per kilogram with high cycle life and produced in volume is not very far and will likely happen in 3 to 4 years.
Really? And you believe that despite the fact that Nobel Prize winners have failed on claims like this, and Elon Musk's only real innovation in 10 years was to make the batteries slightly bigger.
As I said, I expected a 5.5 times, just do the calculations, going from this size to this size, it's 5.5 times the energy anyway, like whoop-de-doo. You get that by going to a larger cell. So really, like, the only exciting announcement here is the times 6 power due to the tabless design. But apart from this, it's rather disappointing, actually.
In addition, he already has a design for a VTOL jet and is prepared to make one when the battery density allows him to.
No, that's just a rendering from a computer game. Unless, of course, Elon Musk is actually planning to have some sort of Gatling gun on top of his aircraft.
Now, have you ever looked at planes and gone, I could fix this? I just don't have the time. Too busy making.
I have a design for a plane.
You do?
Yes.
A better design?
I mean, probably, I think it is, yes. Well, I mean, the exciting thing to do would be some sort of electric vertical takeoff and landing, supersonic jet of some kind.
Vertical takeoff and landing, meaning no need for a runway. Just shoot up straight in the air and then.
So we know that Elon has a design for a Tesla VTOL jet.
No, we know that he claims he's got one. You know, just like Elizabeth Holmes claimed she had a revolutionary new blood testing machine. I mean, seriously, do people practice to get this gullible?
Typically, when it comes to gas-powered planes, the higher you go, the less efficient the plane is. On the other hand, with electric planes, the higher you go, the more efficient the plane is.
Wow, the higher they go, the more efficient they become. So electric planes are most efficient in space. Awesome. Look, in reality, all planes have to fly in the air. That's how they get their lift. Less air means there's less air to get your lift from. Now, that has some disadvantages. It also has some advantages. Less air means there's less drag from the air. However, it means there's also less air to get your thrust from. Now, with air-breathing engines, of course, you need some of that air to actually burn fuel to generate thrust. So these are the factors that basically determine the cruising altitude of jet airplanes. The plane engines are designed for those altitudes, which happens to be about 30,000-ish feet, which is about the altitude where if you do have a cabin failure, it's not fatal to the passengers because you can drop oxygen masks and breathe normally at that altitude. If you go much higher than this, your options are a gas-type mask and a pressure suit, or blacking out and dying. Which was kind of how it worked on Concorde. Except with Concorde, they decided their best course of action in the event of a cabin depressurization would be rapid descent to a breathable atmosphere. That is, if you were there in a depressurization event, time of useful consciousness was 10 to 15 seconds for a conditioned athlete, and even if you managed to get your mask on in that 10 to 15 seconds, you would soon suffer from hypoxia, despite having the oxygen mask. Now, the concept of just going higher and faster gets progressively trickier, no matter whether you're flying a gas-powered plane or an electric one. Currently, commercial airliners deal with atmospheric thicknesses between 1 atmosphere, which is what you get when you take off, and about 1/4 of an atmosphere, which is what you've got at cruising altitude. Now, I don't know how much higher Elon Musk's fantasy plane goes than any of this, but it would have to be aerodynamically viable over a wider range of atmospheric pressures, and that affects everything. You know, the lift you're going to get, the thrust you're going to get, and so on. Basically, all of the nightmarish problems of supersonic air travel still remain, even if you're in a flying battery. There is a very good reason why this sort of thing didn't end up as a disruptive technology for air travel.
Elon Musk has discussed this before, and pay close attention because this has massive potential.
I think the optimal sort of air transport solution is a VTOL electric supersonic plane. And it actually works together quite well for a bunch of reasons. In particular, the higher you go, the better the more efficient the electric aircraft is. Whereas if you have a combustion aircraft, as you get higher, it tends to get worse because you have a kind of a fixed aperture and air scoop.
Yes. So they were designed with a cruise altitude in mind. The same is true no matter what your plane is.
Because electric aircraft gets more efficient the higher you go, this will actually allow for supersonic speeds far faster than you can imagine. With every foot climbed, air gets thinner and thinner, resulting in less air resistance. This theory is what Elon explained in the previous clip. As with engines, you have to find a way to get the right amount of air in order to operate efficiently. This doesn't apply with electric airplanes.
Yes. Yes, it does. Unless you believe that electric engines are the best way to get into space. You know, because electric motors get more efficient the higher you go.
As an electric plane travels higher and higher, there is less air resistance on the plane, allowing the plane to go faster and faster. This is why it's much easier to fly faster in space than in the atmosphere.
Oh, don't bring up the Hyperloop. Don't bring up the Hyperloop.
Elon explained this when he was proposing his Hyperloop project.
So, that's today's video. I sincerely hope you found it interesting. If you did, drop a thumbs up on it. Subscribe if you don't want to miss out on more videos like this. And if you really like this channel and want to support it directly, you can do it through Patreon. And thanks for watching.